Maya Johnson adjusted the straps of her backpack, her sneakers scuffing softly against the polished floor of John F. Kennedy International Airport. At 17, she was no stranger to travel. But today's trip felt special. Her dad, William Johnson, had surprised her with a first-class ticket on Horizon Airways for a summer getaway to San Francisco. It was a rare treat, a chance to visit her best friend, Zoe, and soak up the West Coast vibe before the grind of senior year. And college applications swallowed her whole. Maya's heart buzzed with anticipation as she weaved through the bustling terminal, her eyes catching the kaleidoscope of travelers, businessmen in crisp suits, families with fussy toddlers, and solo adventurers with weathered backpacks. Airports, to her, were like living stories, each person a chapter heading somewhere new. She wore her usual travel gear, faded blue jeans, a black hoodie, and a pair of white sneakers that had seen better days. Her curly hair was pulled into a loose bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face. Maya didn't care for flashy clothes or designer labels. Her dad always preached humility. Doesn't matter how much you've got, Maya. It's how you treat people that counts. She carried that lesson like a compass, guiding her through a world that sometimes judged her before she even opened her mouth. As the daughter of Horizon Airways CEO and majority owner, she could have flaunted her family's success, but that wasn't her style. She wanted to earn her place, not ride on her dad's coattails. The check-in line moved quickly, and Maya handed her ID and boarding pass to a TSA agent with a tired smile. "Have a good flight," the agent said, waving her through. She nodded, murmuring a polite thank you, and headed toward the security checkpoint. The routine was second nature: shoes off, backpack in the bin, phone and keys in a tray. She breezed through the scanner, flashing another smile at the officer who nodded her along. Maya loved these small interactions, the fleeting moments of connection with strangers. She often imagined their lives, where they were going, what they were leaving behind. It was a game she played to pass the time, a way to feel grounded in the chaos of travel. At Gate 23, the boarding area for Horizon Airways Flight 712 to San Francisco, the crowd was a mix of sharply dressed executives and casual vacationers. Maya's boarding pass read Seat 2A, first class, an early birthday gift from her dad for her upcoming 18th. She still got a thrill from flying first class, not just for the cushy seats or free drinks, but because it reminded her of her family's journey. William Johnson had grown up in a working-class neighborhood in Atlanta, juggling night shifts at a diner while earning his business degree. He'd co-founded Horizon Airways with a vision of an airline that treated every passenger like they mattered, no matter their background. Over the decades, Horizon had grown from a regional carrier to a major player, known for its warm service and modern fleet. William's story was one of grit and heart, and Maya carried it with pride. But as she approached the gate, something felt off. The gate agent, a weary man in his late 40s with a name tag reading Carl Mitchell, stood behind the counter, his eyes narrowing as they landed on her. His gaze swept over her hoodie, her sneakers, her backpack, lingering just long enough to make her skin prickle. Maya had felt this kind of scrutiny before, the unspoken question of whether she belonged. In certain spaces, she pushed the thought aside, reminding herself not to assume the worst. Maybe he was just having a bad day. She stepped up to the counter, holding out her boarding pass with a practiced smile. "Hi, I'm on Flight 712 to San Francisco," she said, her voice steady but warm. Carl took the boarding pass, his fingers brushing hers as he scanned it with deliberate slowness. The beep of the scanner filled the silence, but his expression didn't soften. He glanced at the screen, then back at her, his brow furrowing like he'd found a puzzle he didn't like. "First class, huh?" he said, his tone flat, almost accusing. "Seat 2A. "Yeah, that's me," Maya replied, keeping her smile in place, though her stomach tightened. She could feel the weight of his stare, the way it seemed to question her presence in the priority lane. He handed the pass back, his lips twitching into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Boarding hasn't started yet. Step aside and wait. No welcome aboard, no enjoy your flight," just a curt dismissal that left her feeling like she'd done something wrong. Maya nodded, stepping to the side and pulling out her phone to check the time. Just a grumpy guy, she told herself. Don't let it get to you. But the unease lingered, a quiet hum in the back of her mind. She'd navigated moments like this before, subtle slights, assumptions about her based on her skin color or age. Growing up as a black girl in spaces where she was often the only one like her, she'd learned to read the room, to sense when someone was sizing her up unfairly. Still, she hated how it made her second-guess herself. Like she had to prove she deserved to be there. She found a seat near the gate, slipping her earbuds in and scrolling through her playlist. The terminal buzzed around her, announcements crackling over the intercom, kids laughing, suitcases rolling across the floor. Maya tried to focus on the music, letting the bass line of her favorite song drown out the nagging feeling in her gut. She texted Zoe at the gate. "Can't wait to see you." Zoe replied instantly with a string of heart emojis and a "hurry up. I'm making tacos tonight." Maya grinned, the promise of her friend's cooking easing her nerves. When the boarding announcement for first class finally came, Maya joined a small line of passengers, mostly older men in tailored suits and a few women with expensive handbags. Carl was still at the counter, scanning passes with the same stern expression. As she handed him her boarding pass again, he barely looked at her, his fingers moving mechanically. Another agent, a younger woman with a friendlier demeanor, checked her ID and waved her through. "Welcome aboard," the woman said, and Maya felt a flicker of relief. Maybe the flight itself would be smoother. Stepping onto the jet bridge, Maya inhaled the familiar scent of jet fuel and recycled air. The hum of the plane's engines vibrated faintly under her feet, a reminder of the adventure ahead. She boarded the aircraft, greeted by a flight attendant at the door whose name tag read Brenda Walsh. Brenda was in her early 30s, with tightly pinned blonde hair and a smile that seemed more perfunctory than genuine. "Good morning," Brenda said, handing Maya a warm towel. "Seat number 2A, Maya answered, holding up her boarding pass. Brenda's eyes flicked over her, a quick once-over that felt like a judgment. "Right this way," she said, stepping aside to let Maya pass. The politeness was there, but it felt hollow, like a script Brenda was reading from memory. Maya brushed it off, telling herself she was being paranoid. She found her seat in the first-class cabin, a spacious leather recliner by the window, and stowed her backpack in the overhead bin. The cabin was still mostly empty, with only a handful of passengers settling in. A man in a navy blazer took seat 1B, already typing furiously on his laptop. A woman in her 50s, wearing a silk scarf, claimed 3C, flipping through a novel with a serene expression. Maya sank into her seat, the leather cool against her back. She plugged in her earbuds and opened the in-flight entertainment screen, scrolling through movies. The cabin filled slowly, the murmur of voices blending with the faint clink of glassware as the crew prepared for service. Maya chose a documentary about urban gardening, something light to ease her into the 6-hour flight. She glanced out the window, watching ground crew load luggage onto the plane, their neon vests glowing under the morning sun. The world outside felt distant, like she was already halfway to San Francisco. But that nagging unease from the gate hadn't fully faded. Maya couldn't shake the memory of Carl's cold stare or Brenda's stiff smile. She told herself it was nothing, just a couple of off moments in an otherwise normal day. She'd flown Horizon plenty of times, often in first class, and never had an issue. Her dad's airline was known for its hospitality, a point of pride for the whole family. Yet, as the plane's doors closed and the safety briefing began, Maya felt a subtle shift in the air. Like the calm before a storm she couldn't condition or yet see. The jet engines roared to life, and Maya leaned back, closing her eyes as the plane taxied toward the runway. She loved this part, the rush of acceleration, the moment the ground fell away, and the sky opened up. It was a reminder of possibility, of how far she could go. But today, that feeling was tinged with something else, a quiet dread she couldn't name. Little did she know, the next few hours would test her in ways she'd never imagined, turning a routine flight into a battle for dignity that would echo far beyond the skies. The hum of the engines settled into a steady drone as Horizon Airways Flight 712 climbed to cruising altitude. Maya Johnson leaned back in her first-class seat, 2A. the plush leather cradling her as she tried to shake off the lingering unease from the gate. The view outside her window was a sea of clouds, their edges glowing gold in the morning light. She'd hoped the familiar thrill of takeoff would wash away the memory of Carl Mitchell's skeptical stare and Brenda Walsh's forced smile. But the knot in her stomach hadn't loosened. She adjusted her earbuds, the urban gardening documentary playing softly on the in-flight screen, and told herself to focus. San Francisco was waiting those tacos, late-night talks, and a week of freedom before senior year swallowed her time. This was supposed to be her escape, not a gauntlet. The first-class cabin was quiet, save for the faint clink of glasses and the rustle of newspapers. The man in 1B, a middle-aged executive with salt and pepper hair, was still glued to his laptop, his fingers tapping out emails with relentless precision. Across the aisle, the woman in 3C turned a page in her novel, her silk scarf catching the overhead light. Maya envied their calm, the way they seemed to belong effortlessly in this space. She'd flown first class before, a perk of her dad's position as Horizon Airways CEO. But today, she felt like an outsider, as if every glance carried a question she couldn't answer. A flight attendant approached, pushing a cart with drinks. It wasn't Brenda this time, but a younger man with a name tag reading Daniel Rivera. His smile was genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Something to drink, miss?" he asked, his voice warm. "Orange juice, please," Maya said, returning a small smile. She appreciated his kindness, a stark contrast to the gate agent's coldness. Daniel poured her a glass, setting it on her tray table with a napkin. "Enjoy," he said before moving to the next passenger. Maya sipped the juice, the tartness grounding her for a moment. She glanced at her phone, still in airplane mode, and considered texting Zoe once the Wi-Fi was available. A quick "made it on board" would keep her friend from worrying, but her moment of calm didn't last. Brenda Walsh appeared in the aisle, her posture stiff, her lips pressed into a thin line. She stopped beside Maya's seat, holding a small tablet. "Miss Johnson," she said, her voice clipped, "I need to see your boarding pass again." Maya blinked, caught off guard. She pulled out her earbuds, the documentary pausing automatically. "Sure," she said, reaching for her backpack under the seat. Her fingers fumbled slightly as she unzipped the front pocket and retrieved the boarding pass. "Is something wrong?" she asked, handing it over, her tone polite but edged with caution. Brenda took the pass, scanning it with her tablet. Her eyes flicked between the screen and Maya, her expression unreadable but heavy with implication. "We're verifying first-class tickets," she said, her words measured. "Standard procedure to ensure everything's in order." Maya's brow furrowed. "Okay, but I showed it at the gate. It scanned fine." She kept her voice steady, though her pulse quickened. She'd never been asked to ratio her boarding pass after boarding. The cabin felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. Brenda didn't respond immediately, her fingers tapping the tablet. "Where did you get this ticket?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to cut through the hum of the engines. Maya's chest tightened. "My dad booked it for me," she said, forcing herself to stay calm. "It's a gift for my birthday. He sent me the confirmation email." She reached for her phone to pull up the itinerary, but Brenda's next words stopped her cold. "The name on the credit card doesn't match yours," Brenda said, her eyes narrowing. "That raises red flags." Maya stared, disbelief washing over her. "It's my dad's credit card," she explained, her voice rising slightly despite her efforts to keep it even. "He's William Johnson. I'm 17, I don't have my own card yet. He booked it through the Horizon employee portal." She opened her phone, scrolling to the email her dad had forwarded, complete with the official Horizon Airways logo and his corporate signature. "Here, I can show you." Brenda barely glanced at the screen, her lips pursing. "Emails can be faked," she said dismissively. "We'll need more than that to verify." Maya's hands trembled, a mix of frustration and embarrassment bubbling up. She could feel the eyes of nearby passengers starting to drift toward her. The man in 1B paused his typing, his head tilting slightly. The woman in 3C lowered her book, her gaze flickering between Maya and Brenda. "I have my ID, too," Maya offered, pulling her driver's license from her wallet. "And the booking reference number. You can check it in your system, right?" Brenda took the ID, giving it a cursory look before handing it back. "We'll handle it," she said, her tone final, as if Maya's words were an inconvenience. She turned and walked toward the galley, the boarding pass still in her hand. Maya sat frozen, her heart pounding. The cabin lights seemed too bright, the air too thin. She tried to focus on her breathing, slow and steady, but the sting of being singled out burned in her chest. She'd faced microaggressions before, teachers assuming she wasn't in the advanced class, store clerks following her a little too closely, but this felt different, more deliberate, more public. She glanced around, hoping for a sympathetic face, but most passengers had returned to their own worlds. Only the woman in 3C met her eyes, offering a small, encouraging nod before returning to her book. Maya clutched her phone, the email still open on the screen. She wanted to call her dad, to hear his reassuring voice, but the plane was at 35,000 feet, and her phone was useless without Wi-Fi. She considered asking Daniel about the in-flight Wi-Fi, but before she could flag him down, a new figure appeared in the aisle. It was Carl Mitchell, the gate agent from earlier. Maya's stomach dropped. He wasn't in the usual gate agent uniform now, just a Navy Horizon Airways polo and khakis, but his stern expression was unmistakable. He stood beside Brenda, who'd returned with her tablet, and the two exchanged a low, urgent conversation. Carl's eyes locked onto Maya, his jaw tightening. "Miss Johnson," he said, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the cabin. "We need to speak with you." Maya's throat went dry. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. She unbuckled her seatbelt, standing to face them, though her legs felt unsteady. The cabin was now fully alert, passengers craning their necks to see what was happening. The man in 1B closed his laptop, his brow furrowing. The woman in 3C set her book down entirely, her lips parting in concern. "There's a discrepancy with your ticket," Carl said, his tone dripping with condescension. "We have reason to believe it may have been purchased fraudulently." Maya's jaw dropped. "That's impossible," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "My dad booked it. I showed you the email, the ID, everything. What more do you need?" Carl crossed his arms, his posture rigid. "The credit card used doesn't match your name, and we have no record of a parental consent form for a minor traveling in first class. This is a serious matter, and we need to resolve it now." "I'm not that kind of minor," Maya snapped, her patience fraying. "I'm 17. I can fly alone. My dad's name is on the booking because he's the one who paid for it. This isn't complicated." She held up her phone again, the email glowing on the screen. "Look at the booking reference. Check it in your system." Brenda stepped forward, her voice cold. "We've already checked. The system flagged it as suspicious. You'll need to provide definitive proof, or we'll have to ask you to move to economy or off the flight at our next stop." Maya's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Next stop? This is a direct flight to San Francisco," she said, her voice rising. "I'm not going anywhere. I didn't do anything wrong." The cabin was now a stage, every passenger a witness. The man in 1B leaned forward, his expression darkening. "Is this really necessary?" he muttered, loud enough for Carl to hear. The woman in 3C nodded in agreement, her eyes narrowing at Brenda. Maya felt a flicker of gratitude, but it did little to ease the humiliation creeping over her. She could sense the weight of their stares, some curious, some judgmental, all amplifying the heat rising in her cheeks. Carl ignored the passengers, his focus locked on Maya. "We're following protocol," he said, his voice unwavering. "If you can't provide proof, we'll need you to come to the galley so we can discuss this privately." Maya's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to scream, to tell them exactly who her dad was, William Johnson, the man who signed their paychecks, but something held her back. Her dad had always taught her to handle conflicts with grace, to let the facts speak for themselves. But grace was hard to muster when she was being treated like a criminal. "I have proof," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I've shown you everything. If you just call corporate, they can confirm it." Brenda scoffed, a sound that cut through Maya like a blade. "We're not calling corporate in the middle of a flight," she said. "You need to cooperate, or this will escalate." Escalate, Maya repeated, her voice breaking. You're accusing me of fraud with no evidence. How is that fair? Before Carl could respond, Daniel appeared, his face tense. Everything okay here? He asked, glancing between Maya and the others. His tone was cautious, like he was stepping into a minefield. We're handling it, Brenda snapped, her eyes flashing. But Daniel didn't back off. He looked at Maya, his expression softening slightly. Miss, is there anything I can do to help? Maya seized the opening. I just need to call my dad, she said, her voice pleading. He can clear this up into seconds. Please, Carl's jaw tightened. No calls during flight, he said, his voice like steel. And we're not turning this into a circus. Come to the galley now. Maya's vision blurred with unshed tears. She felt trapped, cornered in a way she'd never experienced. The cabin seemed to close in, the passengers' stares pressing against her like a physical weight. She wanted to run, to disappear, but there was nowhere to go. She took a shaky breath, squaring her shoulders. I'm not moving until you let me prove I belong here, she said, her voice low but resolute. Carl's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Maya thought he might grab her. But Daniel stepped closer, his body subtly blocking Carl's path. Let's take a step back, Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. We can verify this without making a scene. Brenda shot Daniel a withering look. Stay out of this, Rivera, she said. You're not in charge here. The tension was palpable, a live wire crackling between them. Maya's heart raced, her mind spinning with what might happen next. She could feel the weight of the moment, the way it was spiraling beyond her control. Little did she know, this was only the beginning, a spark that would soon ignite a firestorm, not just on this flight, but across the skies and beyond. The first-class cabin of Horizon Airways Flight 712 felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with tension as Maya Johnson stood her ground in Seat 2A. Her heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against her ribs, as Carl Mitchell, the gate agent, loomed over her, his arms crossed and his face a mask of unyielding authority. Beside him, Brenda Walsh gripped her tablet like a shield, her lips pursed in a way that screamed disapproval. Maya's boarding pass, still in Brenda's hand, felt like a stolen piece of her dignity. The accusation of a fraudulent ticket hung heavy, each word from Carl and Brenda slicing through her like a paper cut small but stinging, impossible to ignore. She'd shown them her ID, her email confirmation, everything she had, but they refused to budge. The cabin was now a stage, and Maya was the unwilling star of a drama she hadn't signed up for. I'm not moving, Maya repeated, her voice trembling but resolute. She clutched her phone, the screen still glowing with the email from her dad, William Johnson, Horizon Airways CEO. You can check the booking reference, call corporate, do something other than accuse me without proof. Her eyes darted between Carl and Brenda, searching for a crack in their resolve, but their expressions were stone cold. Carl's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing to slits. Miss Johnson, you're making this harder than it needs to be, he said, his voice low but laced with menace. We've asked you to come to the galley to resolve this privately. If you refuse, we'll have no choice but to treat you as a non-compliant passenger. Non-compliant, Maya's voice cracked, disbelief flooding her. You're the ones not listening. I've given you everything. What more do you want? Her hands shook, and she shoved her phone back into her pocket to hide the tremor. The weight of the cabin's stairs pressed against her passengers in first class, some openly watching, others pretending not to. The man in 1B, the executive with the laptop, had set his device aside, his brow furrowed as he leaned forward. The woman in 3C, her novel forgotten, gripped the armrest, her eyes flashing with quiet outrage. Brenda stepped closer, her voice sharp. We've told you, the credit card doesn't match your name. That's a red flag. If you can't provide definitive proof right now, you'll need to move to economy or we'll remove you at our next stop. Maya's breath hitched. There's no next stop. This is a direct flight to San Francisco. Her voice rose, the frustration spilling over. And I'm not going anywhere. My dad booked this ticket. He's William Johnson. Call him, and this is over. Carl let out a short, barking laugh, the sound cutting through the cabin like a slap. William Johnson, the CEO. Really, his tone dripped with sarcasm, as if the idea was absurd. "You expect us to believe you're the daughter of the guy who runs this airline? Come on, kid. That's a stretch." Maya's face burned, a mix of anger and humiliation. She wanted to scream that it wasn't a stretch, that her dad had built Horizon from the ground up, that this was his airline, his legacy. But the words caught in her throat, choked by the fear of escalating things further. Her dad had always told her to stay calm in conflicts, to let reason win, but reason wasn't working here. These people weren't listening. They'd already decided she didn't belong. "I'm not lying," she said, her voice quieter now, but no less firm. "Just let me call him. One call, and you'll see." Brenda's lips curled into a faint smirk. "No calls during flight," she said, echoing Carl's earlier refusal. "And we're not wasting time on a story that doesn't add up. You need to come with us now." The word now landed like a gavel, final and unyielding. Maya's pulse raced, her mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. What if they dragged her out of her seat? What if they called security? She'd seen videos online, passengers, especially black passengers, being manhandled by airline staff, their pleas ignored. The thought sent a chill down her spine. She wasn't just fighting for her seat. She was fighting for her dignity, her right to be seen as a person, not a problem. Before she could respond, Daniel Rivera, the younger flight attendant, stepped into the aisle, his face tight with unease. "Hey, let's take a breath here," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "There's no need to escalate. We can verify her ticket without making a scene." He glanced at Maya, his eyes softening with a flicker of empathy. Brenda shot him a withering look. "This isn't your call, Rivera," she snapped. "Stay out of it." Daniel hesitated, his hands twitching at his sides, but he didn't back down. "I'm just saying, passengers are watching. We don't want this getting out of hand." He nodded toward the cabin, where several passengers were now openly staring, some whispering to each other. The man in 1B cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the tension. "Is this really how Horizon handles things?" he asked, his tone sharp. "She's shown you her ID. Why are you pushing this?" Carl turned, his face reddening. "Sir, this is an airline security matter," he said, his voice tight. "We appreciate your concern, but we're following protocol." "Protocol?" The woman in 3C spoke up, her voice steady, but laced with indignation. "You're harassing a young girl over a ticket you haven't even properly checked. That's not protocol, that's prejudice." The word prejudice hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Maya's chest tightened, a mix of gratitude and embarrassment washing over her. She was thankful for the support, but she hated being the center of this spectacle. She just wanted to disappear, to rewind the clock to when she was just another passenger, unnoticed and unbothered. Carl's eyes flashed with anger, but he kept his tone controlled. "Ma'am, we're doing our job. If you'd like to file a complaint, you can do so after the flight. I'll do more than that," the woman muttered, pulling out her phone. Maya caught a glimpse of the screen. She was opening the camera app. Others followed suit, phones appearing in hands across the cabin. The soft click of recordings starting sent a jolt through Maya. This was about to go viral, whether she wanted it to or not. Carl noticed the phones, his jaw clenching. "Put those away," he barked, but his voice lacked conviction. The passengers ignored him, their lenses trained on the scene. Maya felt exposed like a bug under a microscope, but the recordings also gave her a strange sense of power. They were proof that she wasn't imagining this, that she wasn't alone. "Miss Johnson," Carl said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low, "you're causing a disturbance. Come to the galley, or we'll have to involve the air marshal." The mention of an air marshal sent a spike of fear through Maya. She pictured herself being dragged through the cabin, hands cuffed, headlines screaming about a disruptive passenger. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps, panic clawing at her chest. "I'm not causing anything," she said, her voice breaking. "You're the ones making this a problem. Just let me call my dad." Brenda stepped forward, her patience visibly gone. "That's enough," she said, reaching for Maya's arm. "You're coming with us." "Don't touch me," Maya said, pulling back instinctively. Her voice was louder now, drawing more eyes. Brenda froze, her hand hovering in the air, but Carl had no such hesitation. He grabbed Maya's elbow, his grip firm and unyielding. "Let's go," he said, yanking her toward the aisle. Pain shot through Maya's arm as she stumbled, her backpack falling to the floor. The cabin erupted in chaos. "Hey, stop that!" the man in 1B shouted, standing from his seat. The woman in 3C was on her feet too, her phone still recording. "She's a kid. What's wrong with you? Get your hands off her," another passenger called from across the aisle, a woman in a red blazer who'd been quiet until now. The murmurs grew into a chorus of outrage, voices overlapping in a wave of protest. Maya's vision blurred with tears, the humiliation overwhelming. She twisted her arm, trying to break free, but Carl's grip tightened, his fingers digging into her skin. "Stop," Daniel shouted, pushing between Maya and Carl. "This is way out of line. Let her go, Mitchell." His voice trembled, a mix of fear and defiance, but it was enough to make Carl pause. He released Maya's arm, stepping back with a scowl, but the damage was done. A red mark bloomed on her skin, the beginnings of a bruise that would darken by the hour. Maya sank back into her seat, her breath hitching as tears spilled down her cheeks. She hugged her arms to her chest, trying to make herself small, invisible. The cabin was a storm of noise, passengers shouting, phones recording, Brenda barking at everyone to sit down. Maya's eyes met the woman in 3C, who gave her a look of fierce solidarity. "You're okay, sweetheart," the woman mouthed, her voice lost in the chaos but her meaning clear. Carl's face was a mask of fury, but he seemed to realize he was losing control. "Everyone, return to your seats," he said, his voice strained. "This is a security issue, and we're handling it." "Handling it?" The man in 1B snapped. "You're assaulting a passenger. I'm a lawyer, and I'm telling you, you're way over the line. Let her make her call." Maya seized the moment, her voice shaky but clear. "Please, just let me call my dad. He'll tell you everything. I'm not lying." She looked at Daniel, who was still standing protectively nearby. "Please," Daniel nodded, turning to Brenda. "Come on. Brenda, let's de-escalate. She's not a threat. We can verify this with corporate." Brenda's lips tightened, but she didn't argue. Carl, however, wasn't ready to back down. "She's refusing to cooperate," he said, his voice rising. "If she doesn't come with us, we'll divert the flight and have her removed." The word divert sent a fresh wave of panic through Maya. Divert the flight? For her? The idea was absurd, but Carl's tone made it clear he wasn't bluffing. She pictured the plane landing at some random airport, security swarming the cabin. Her name splashed across the news. Her tears fell faster, and she wiped them away, hating how vulnerable she felt. The cabin's outrage grew louder, passengers now openly defying Carl and Brenda. "This is ridiculous," the woman in the red blazer shouted. "She's done nothing wrong. Call her dad. I'm posting this right now," another passenger said, tapping furiously on his phone. Maya caught a glimpse of his screen, a video of the confrontation, already uploading to X. Her stomach churned. This was spiraling, and she was powerless to stop it. Daniel raised his hands, trying to calm the crowd. "Everyone, please, let's stay seated. We'll sort this out." He turned to Carl, his voice low but firm. "Mitchell, you're making this worse. Let her call. It's the easiest way." Carl's face reddened, his pride clearly wounded. He opened his mouth to argue, but a sudden jolt shook the plane, the seatbelt sign dinging on. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The announcement was a lifeline. Forcing everyone to pause, Carl glared at Maya, but he stepped back, retreating to the galley with Brenda in tow. Daniel lingered, crouching beside Maya's seat. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. Maya shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No," she whispered. "I just want to go home." Daniel handed her a tissue from his pocket. "Hang in there," he said. "We'll fix this." He stood and returned to his duties, leaving Maya alone in her seat. The cabin's eyes still on her. She fastened her seatbelt, staring out the window at the endless clouds. The turbulence rattled the plane, a mirror to the storm inside her. She felt raw, exposed, her arm throbbing where Carl had grabbed her. The passenger's support was a small comfort, but it couldn't erase the humiliation, the fear, the anger. She closed her eyes, picturing her dad's face, his steady voice. If she could just reach him, this nightmare would end. But as the plane shook and the seatbelt sign glowed, she was trapped, a prisoner in a sky she'd once loved, with no way out but forward. The turbulence had passed, but the air in the first-class cabin of Horizon Airways Flight 712 remained charged. A brittle silence broken only by the soft hum of the engines and the occasional rustle of passengers shifting in their seats. Maya Johnson sat into A, her hands gripping the armrests, the red mark on her arm a throbbing reminder of Carl Mitchell's rough grip. Her eyes were dry now, the tears replaced by a simmering resolve. The chaos of the confrontation, Carl and Brenda Walsh accusing her of fraud, the passengers' outrage. The phone's recording every moment had left her raw, but the pilot's announcement had bought her a temporary reprieve. The seatbelt sign was off, and the cabin held its breath, waiting for the next move. Maya's gaze flicked to the galley, where Carl and Brenda stood, their heads bent in a heated whisper. She could feel their eyes on her, even from across the cabin, their skepticism a tangible weight. Daniel Rivera, the young flight attendant who'd tried to de-escalate, moved through the aisle, offering drinks with a forced smile, but his glances toward Maya were heavy with concern. The passengers, too, were restless. Some still held their phones, ready to record, while others murmured to each other, their voices a low buzz of indignation. The man in 1B, the lawyer who'd spoken up, tapped notes into his laptop, his jaw set. The woman in 3C, her novel abandoned, watched Maya with a quiet intensity, as if willing her to stay strong. Maya's phone rested in her lap, still in airplane mode, useless without Wi-Fi or a signal. She wanted to call her dad, William Johnson, the CEO of Horizon Airways, to end this nightmare with one conversation. But Carl and Brenda had stonewalled her at every turn, dismissing her proof, mocking her claim that William was her father. The humiliation stung, but the passengers' support, their shouts, their cameras, their defiance had given her a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone. Not entirely. Daniel approached her seat, his voice low. "Miss Johnson, can I get you anything? Water, maybe?" His kindness felt like a lifeline, a reminder that not everyone on this flight saw her as a problem. Maya managed a small nod. "Water would be great." "Thanks," she paused, then added, "And is there any way I can call my dad? I know they said no calls, but there's got to be a way, right?" Daniel hesitated, glancing toward the galley where Carl and Brenda were still huddled. "It's tricky," he admitted. "The in-flight phone's usually for crew or emergencies, and they're being difficult. But I'll see what I can do. Hang in there." As Daniel walked away, the woman in 3C leaned across the aisle, her voice soft but firm. "Don't let them bully you, sweetheart. You've got rights, and we're watching." She held up her phone, the video app still open, a silent promise to keep recording. Maya's throat tightened with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The woman nodded, settling back into her seat, her eyes never leaving the galley. Before Maya could process the moment, Carl emerged from the galley, his posture rigid, his face a storm cloud. Brenda trailed behind, her tablet clutched to her chest. They stopped at Maya's seat, and the cabin fell silent, every eye on them. Carl's voice was cold, calculated. "Miss Johnson, we've given you every chance to cooperate. If you can't provide verifiable proof right now, we'll have no choice but to relocate you to economy or remove you at San Francisco." Maya's heart lurched. "Remove me," she repeated, her voice shaking with disbelief. "For what? I've shown you my ID, the email, the booking reference. You're the ones refusing to check it properly." The man in 1B stood, his voice cutting through the tension. "This is absurd," he said, his tone sharp. "You've got her documents. Call corporate and verify it. You're escalating this for no reason, and it's on camera." He gestured to the passengers, several of whom held up their phones, red recording lights blinking . Carl's face reddened, but he didn't back down. "Sir, this is an airline matter. Stay out of it." "I'm a lawyer," the man shot back, "and I'm telling you, you're violating her rights. Let her make a call, or you're looking at a lawsuit." The word lawsuit hung in the air, and Maya saw a flicker of unease cross Brenda's face. Carl, however, doubled down. "We're not calling anyone mid-flight," he said. "She needs to comply, or we'll involve the air marshal." The threat of the air marshal sent a chill through Maya, but the passengers' outrage erupted anew. "This is ridiculous," the woman in the red blazer shouted from 4A. "She's a kid, not a criminal." Others joined in, their voices overlapping in a chorus of protest. Maya's chest tightened, torn between gratitude and the crushing weight of being the center of this storm. Daniel reappeared, his face pale but determined. "Enough," he said, stepping between Carl and Maya. "This is getting out of hand. Let her call her dad." "It's one call, Mitchell. It'll clear this up." Carl's eyes narrowed, his pride clearly wounded. "You don't give orders, Rivera," he snapped. But the passengers' shouts grew louder, and the weight of their scrutiny seemed to shift the balance. Brenda whispered something to Carl, her voice urgent, and for the first time, Maya saw a crack in their united front. "Fine," Carl said through gritted teeth. "She can use the in-flight phone to call corporate. But if this doesn't check out, she's out of first class." He turned to Maya, his voice dripping with venom. "Don't waste our time." Maya's heart soared, a rush of relief flooding her. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. She looked at Daniel, who gave her a small nod, his expression a mix of relief and nerves. Brenda led the way to the galley, a cramped space behind a curtain that separated them from the cabin. Maya followed, flanked by Daniel, while Carl trailed behind, his presence like a shadow. The galley was cluttered with carts and trays, the air heavy with the scent of coffee and packaged meals. A small phone was mounted on the wall, its receiver a lifeline Maya could almost taste. Daniel picked up the phone, punching in a code. "I'll call the corporate desk," he said, his voice steady. "They can verify the ticket and get her dad on the line." He glanced at Maya, offering a reassuring smile. "What's your dad's name again?" "William Johnson," Maya said, her voice firm. "He's the CEO." Carl snorted, but Daniel ignored him. Speaking into the receiver, "This is Daniel Rivera, flight attendant on Flight 712 to San Francisco. We have a passenger situation that needs immediate resolution. I need to speak to someone at the corporate desk about a ticket verification. For Maya Johnson, booked by William Johnson." The wait was agonizing, each second stretching into eternity. Maya's pulse thrummed in her ears. Her eyes fixed on the phone, she could hear the faint crackle of the line, the muffled voice on the other end. Passengers peeked through the curtain, their phones still recording, their murmurs a steady hum of support. Maya clung to that, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Finally, Daniel's eyes widened. "Yes, thank you," he said into the phone. "Can you patch us through to Murdoch Johnson? It's urgent." He covered the receiver, turning to Maya. "They're getting his assistant." "We're almost there." Maya's breath caught, hope surging through her. She ignored Carl's glare, Brenda's tense silence, and focused on the phone. A moment later, a crisp, professional voice came on the line. "This is Karen Ellis, Mr. Johnson's executive assistant. What's going on?" Daniel handed the phone to Maya, his voice gentle. "Go ahead. Keep it brief." Maya took the receiver, her hands trembling. "Ms. Ellis, it's Maya Johnson," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I'm on Flight 712, and they're saying my ticket is fraudulent. They won't let me stay in first class, and they grabbed me. I need to talk to my dad." There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "Maya? Oh my God, are you okay?" Karen's voice was laced with concern. "Your dad's in a board meeting, but I'll get him right now. Hold on." Maya's knees nearly buckled with relief. She could hear Karen's muffled voice, the sound of a door opening, urgent footsteps. The galley felt smaller, the air thicker, but Maya clung to the phone, her lifeline to the truth. Carl and Brenda exchanged a glance, their confidence faltering for the first time. Daniel stood nearby, his presence a quiet reassurance. A minute later, a familiar voice roared through the receiver, ragged with worry and anger. "Maya, honey, what the hell is going on?" William Johnson's deep baritone was unmistakable, a mix of paternal concern and CEO authority. "Are you hurt?" Maya's eyes welled up, but she held it together. "Dad, they're saying my ticket's fake," she said, her voice breaking. "They accused me of fraud, and they grabbed my arm. They wouldn't let me call you." "It's a mess." William's voice hardened, a controlled fury that Maya knew well. "Grabbed you? They put their hands on you?" He took a sharp breath. "Are you okay? Tell me you're not hurt." "My arm's bruised, but I'm okay," Maya said, touching the sore spot. "Dad, they don't believe you're my dad. They're trying to kick me out of first class." There was a pause, then a low growl. "Put the flight crew on. Now." Maya handed the phone to Daniel, her voice trembling. "He wants to talk to you." Daniel took the receiver, but before he could speak, Carl stepped forward, his face pale but defiant. "I'll handle it," Carl said, snatching the phone. "This is Carl Mitchell, gate agent on Flight 712. We're dealing with a potential fraud situation." His words were cut off by a barrage from the other end, William's voice loud enough to leak through the receiver. Carl's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Yes, sir," he stammered. I didn't know. We were following protocol." "Yes, sir, I understand." Brenda's eyes widened, her tablet slipping slightly in her hands. The passengers beyond the curtain were silent, straining to hear. Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding as the truth unfolded. Carl's bravado crumbled, his shoulders slumping as William's words hit like a sledgehammer. "Of course, sir," he said, his voice barely audible. "We'll rectify this immediately. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson." He hung up, his hand shaking as he set the receiver down. The galley was silent, the weight of William's authority settling over them like a storm cloud. Carl avoided Maya's gaze, his face beet red. Brenda looked like she might cry, her lips trembling as she clutched her tablet. Daniel broke the silence, his voice gentle but firm. "Miss Johnson, let's get you back to your seat." Mer. Johnson said, "To make sure you're comfortable for the rest of the flight." Maya nodded, her legs unsteady as she followed Daniel out of the galley. The passengers erupted in murmurs, some clapping softly, others nodding in approval. The man in 1B gave her a thumbs up, his laptop open to a document titled Incident Report. The woman in 3C reached out, squeezing Maya's hand as she passed. "You did good, honey," she whispered. Maya sank into her seat, her body trembling with a mix of relief and exhaustion. The bruise on her arm throbbed, but the weight of the accusation had lifted. Replaced by a quiet vindication, she glanced at the galley where Carl and Brenda remained. Their heads bowed in a frantic discussion. They knew they'd crossed a line, and William Johnson wasn't a man to let it slide. As the flight continued, the cabin settled into an uneasy calm. Maya stared out the window, the clouds a blur of white and gold. She'd won this round, but the fight wasn't over. The passengers' videos were already spreading, the truth spiraling beyond the plane. She could feel it, the storm waiting for her in San Francisco, the media, the fallout. But for now, she was still in the sky, and for the first time in hours, she felt like she could breathe. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as Horizon Airways Flight 712 began its descent into San Francisco International Airport, the hum of the engines softening to a low rumble. Maya Johnson sat in seat 2A, her hands folded in her lap, the bruise on her arm a dull ache beneath the ice pack Daniel Rivera had quietly slipped her. The confrontation in the galley, her dad, William Johnson, tearing into Carl Mitchell over the in-flight phone had shifted the atmosphere in first class. The passengers' outrage had quieted into a tense anticipation, their phones now tucked away but still buzzing with the videos they'd recorded. Maya could feel their glances, some supportive, others curious, as if she were a puzzle they were still piecing together. She kept her eyes on the window, the golden haze of the California coast coming into view, a promise of solid ground and her dad's embrace. Carl and Brenda had retreated to the galley, their presence a faint shadow behind the curtain. Daniel moved through the cabin with practiced ease, offering snacks and drinks, but his eyes lingered on Maya, checking in without words. The man in 1B, the lawyer, was back to typing, his screen filled with notes that Maya suspected were about her ordeal. The woman in 3C, her novel still untouched, gave Maya a small smile whenever their eyes met, a silent anchor in the storm. Maya was grateful for them, these strangers who'd stood up for her. But the weight of the last few hours pressed against her chest. She felt exposed, like a nerve laid bare, and the thought of what awaited her on the ground made her stomach churn. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, smooth and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final descent into San Francisco. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and your tray tables are stowed. On behalf of Horizon Airways, thank you for flying with us." The words carried a faint irony, and Maya caught a few passengers exchanging knowing looks. This wasn't just a flight, it was a scandal in the making, and they all knew it. Maya fastened her seatbelt, her fingers brushing the sore spot on her arm. She replayed the phone call with her dad, his voice a mix of fury and fear, promising to fix this. William Johnson wasn't just her dad. He was a titan in the airline industry, a man who'd built Horizon Airways on the promise of fairness and respect. The idea that his own employees had treated her like a criminal, had put their hands on her, must have gutted him. Maya wanted to believe he'd make it right, but a small, nagging doubt lingered. Would corporate bureaucracy slow him down? Would Carl and Brenda face real consequences, or would they slip through the cracks? The plane tilted, the San Francisco skyline glinting in the distance. Maya's phone, still in airplane mode, vibrated with a backlog of notifications. She'd turned on the in-flight Wi-Fi briefly, just long enough to see Zoe's frantic texts. "Maya, what's happening? People are posting videos of you on X. The hashtags #Horizon Scandal. #JusticeForMaya had already taken off, the clips of Carl grabbing her arm spreading like wildfire. Maya hadn't watched them yet. The thought of seeing herself so vulnerable, so humiliated, made her nauseous. She turned the phone face down, focusing on the approaching runway instead. The landing was smooth, the wheels kissing the tarmac with a soft screech. As the plane taxied to the gate, Daniel approached her seat, his voice low. "Miss Johnson, your dad arranged a private escort. Stay seated until the other passengers disembark, okay? We'll get you out quietly." Maya nodded, her throat tight. "Thanks, Daniel, for everything." He'd been a small light in this mess, risking his own standing to help her. He gave her a quick smile before returning to his duties, leaving her to wait as the cabin stirred to life. Passengers began gathering their belongings, the rustle of bags and coats filling the air. Many paused by Maya's seat, offering quiet words of support. "Stay strong," the woman in 3C said, pressing a business card into Maya's hand. "My sister's a reporter. Call her if you need to tell your story." The man in 1B, the lawyer, handed her his card too. "If you pursue this legally, I'm happy to help," he said, his voice firm. This was unacceptable. Maya thanked them, tucking the cards into her pocket, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and overwhelm. Carl and Brenda stayed out of sight, their absence conspicuous. Maya overheard a snippet of their conversation as they passed the galley earlier, Carl muttering, "Corporate's gonna bury us." Brenda's response was too soft to catch, but her face had been pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Maya felt no satisfaction in their fear, only a hollow anger. They humiliated her, hurt her, and no amount of regret could undo that. When the cabin was nearly empty, Daniel returned, accompanied by a security officer in a Navy uniform. "Miss Johnson, I'm Officer Chen," the man said, his tone professional but kind. "I'll escort you to a private lounge where your father's waiting." Maya stood, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. Her legs felt unsteady, the weight of the day settling into her bones. She followed Officer Chen and Daniel through the jet bridge, the cool air of the terminal a sharp contrast to the plane's stuffy cabin. As they stepped into the airport, a flurry of camera flashes and shouted questions erupted from beyond a barricade. "Maya, what happened on the flight? Are you suing Horizon?" Reporters and photographers jostled for position, their lenses trained on her. Maya froze, her breath catching, but Officer Chen guided her swiftly past the crowd, his arm a barrier between her and the chaos. Inside the private lounge, the noise faded, replaced by the soft hum of air conditioning and the scent of leather furniture. William Johnson stood near a window, his tall frame silhouetted against the San Francisco skyline. He was in a tailored suit, his usual CEO polish intact, but his face was etched with worry. When he saw Maya, he crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into a tight hug. "Maya, thank God," he murmured, his voice thick. "Are you okay? Let me see your arm." Maya leaned into him, the familiar scent of his cologne grounding her. "I'm okay, Dad," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "It's just a bruise." She pulled back, letting him inspect the red mark, his jaw tightening as he traced it gently with his thumb. "I saw the videos," he said, his voice low, controlled, but simmering with anger. "I can't believe this happened on my airline. My own daughter." He shook his head, his eyes searching hers. "I've already called the board. There's an investigation underway. Mitchell and Walsh are being pulled in for a disciplinary hearing as soon as we're back in New York." Maya nodded, relief mingling with exhaustion. "They wouldn't listen, Dad. They kept saying my ticket was fake, even when I showed them proof. They grabbed me in front of everyone." William's face darkened, his hands clenching into fists. "They'll answer for that," he said. "No one touches my daughter or any passenger like that. This isn't just about you, Maya. It's about what Horizon stands for. I won't let this slide." Officer Chen and Daniel stood discreetly near the door, giving them space. Maya sank onto a plush sofa, her backpack at her feet. "It's all over the internet," she said quietly. "People are posting videos, hashtags, everything. It's a lot." William sat beside her, his expression softening. "I know. My PR team's handling the media, but it's going to be a storm for a while. You don't have to face it alone, okay? We'll get through this together." Maya nodded, but her mind was racing. The videos weren't just about her, they were about every person who'd ever been judged, dismissed, or mistreated because of how they looked. She'd felt the sting of prejudice before, but never like this, never so public, so violent. "Dad," she said, her voice hesitant, "this isn't just about me. It's bigger. They treated me like that because of who I am, because I'm black, because I'm young. If it wasn't me, it'd be someone else." William's eyes softened, a mix of pride and pain. "You're right," he said, "and that's why we're going to do more than just fire a couple of bad apples. We're going to look at our training, our policies, everything. This can't happen again." Maya leaned back, her body heavy with exhaustion. She wanted to believe him, to trust that change was possible, but the memory of Carl's grip, Brenda's sneer, the passengers' phones, it was all too fresh. She glanced at the lounge's TV, muted but showing a news ticker, Horizon Airways incident sparks outrage. Her name flashed across the screen, and she looked away, her stomach twisting. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. William squeezed her hand. "Now, we get you settled at the hotel. You rest, you see Zoe, you try to enjoy what's left of your trip. I'll handle the rest, legal, HR, the press. But Maya, you call the shots on how you want to handle this. If you want to speak out, we'll support you. If you want to stay quiet, that's okay too." Maya nodded, but the weight of the choice pressed against her. Speaking out meant reliving the trauma, facing the cameras, the questions. Staying silent meant letting the story fade, maybe letting Carl and Brenda off too easy. She didn't know what she wanted yet, only that she needed time. William stood, helping her to her feet. "Come on," he said. "There's a car waiting. Let's get you out of here." As they left the lounge, Officer Chen leading the way, Maya felt the world shift beneath her. The airport was a blur of noise and motion, but her dad's arm around her shoulders was steady, a promise that she wasn't alone. The storm was coming, reporters, headlines, maybe even lawsuits, but for now, she was safe, and that was enough. The San Francisco hotel room was a cocoon of soft lighting and muted colors, a stark contrast to the chaos Maya Johnson had left behind at the airport. She sat cross-legged on the plush bed, her phone face down on the comforter, its screen a silent storm of notifications. The bruise on her arm had darkened to a mottled purple, a constant reminder of Carl Mitchell's grip during the nightmare on Horizon Airways Flight 712. It had been 2 days since the incident, and the world outside was ablaze with her story. Videos of the confrontation, Carl and Brenda Walsh accusing her of fraud, the passengers' outrage. Her tearful pleas had exploded across social media, racking up millions of views. Hashtags like #HorizonScandal and #JusticeForMaya trended, relentlessly fueling debates about racial profiling and airline misconduct. Maya wanted to shut it all out, but the weight of it followed her like a shadow. Her dad, William Johnson, Horizon's CEO, had been a whirlwind of action since their reunion at the airport. He'd set up camp in the hotel's conference room, fielding calls from the board, legal team, and PR advisors. Maya could hear his voice through the walls sometimes, steady but sharp, demanding updates on the investigation into Carl and Brenda. He'd promised her justice, and she trusted him, but the process felt distant, like a machine grinding too slowly. Maya's best friend, Zoe, had been a lifeline, dragging her out for tacos and late-night movies to keep her grounded. But even Zoe's infectious laugh couldn't fully erase the knot in Maya's chest. She felt caught between wanting to hide and wanting to fight. The TV in the room was off, but Maya had seen the news clips, pundits dissecting the incident, activists calling for reform, passengers from the flight sharing their accounts on talk shows. The lawyer from 1B, whose card was tucked in her wallet, had already emailed her dad, offering to represent her if she pursued a lawsuit. The woman from 3C had connected Maya with her reporter sister, who'd left a gentle voicemail asking for an interview. Maya hadn't responded to either yet. The idea of speaking out, of putting her face and voice to this firestorm, was daunting. What if people twisted her words? What if they blamed her, called her dramatic or opportunistic? But staying silent felt like letting Carl and Brenda win, letting the system that allowed this to happen off the hook. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Maya, you up?" William's voice was soft, cautious. "Yeah, come in," she called, uncrossing her legs and sitting up straighter. William stepped inside, his suit jacket off, tie loosened, a rare sign of fatigue for a man who always looked in control. He carried a tablet, its screen glowing with what Maya guessed was another update. He sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes searching her face. "How you holding up, kiddo?" Maya shrugged, picking at a thread on the comforter. "Okay, I guess. Zoe's keeping me sane. But it's a lot, Dad. Every time I check my phone, it's like the whole world's talking about me." William's jaw tightened, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "I'm sorry you're caught in this. My PR team's trying to manage the media, but it's moving fast. Too fast." He paused, setting the tablet down. "I've got news, though. The investigation's wrapping up. Carl and Brenda are suspended, effective immediately. We've got enough evidence, passenger statements, videos, your account to move forward with disciplinary action." Maya's heart lifted, but only slightly. "Suspended? That's it, for now," William said, his voice firm. "The board's reviewing everything. Terminations on the table, and HR's digging into their records. Turns out, Carl's had complaints before, nothing this bad, but enough to show a pattern. Brenda's newer, but she didn't exactly cover herself in glory." Maya nodded, her fingers tracing the bruise on her arm. "What about the bigger stuff? You said this wasn't just about them. Then it was about Horizon, about fixing things." William leaned forward, his hands clasped. "And I meant it. We're auditing our training programs, especially on bias and de-escalation. I've got a team working on new protocols to prevent this kind of profiling. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're starting. I want you to know that." Maya met his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, but also the way he carried. This wasn't just a corporate crisis for him, it was personal. She was his daughter, and his airline had failed her. "I believe you," she said quietly. "But Dad, I keep thinking, if I wasn't your daughter, if I didn't have you to call, what would have happened? They could have kicked me off, arrested me, anything. That's not okay." William's face softened, a mix of pride and pain. "You're right, and that's why I'm asking you, what do you want to do next? You've got a voice in this, Maya. The world's listening. You could speak out, push for change, or you can step back, let me handle it. Either way, I've got your back." Maya's stomach twisted. She'd been wrestling with that question since the flight. Speaking out meant reliving the trauma, facing scrutiny, maybe even hate. But it also meant shining a light on the truth, giving a voice to others who'd been treated like she was. She thought of the passengers who'd stood up for her, strangers who'd seen her as a person, not a threat. They deserved to know their actions mattered. I want to say something, she said finally, her voice steady. Not for me, but for everyone else who might go through this. I don't want it to just be a hashtag that fades away. William nodded, a small smile breaking through. That's my girl. Let's do it right, then. My PR team can help you craft a statement, maybe a video. You say what you need to say, and we'll make sure it gets out there. Maya took a deep breath, the decision settling over her like a mantle. Okay, but I want it to be my words, not some polished script. People need to hear the real me. Deal, William said, squeezing her shoulder. We'll set it up tomorrow. For now, get some rest. Zoe's probably planning another taco night. Maya managed a laugh, the first in days. She's relentless. But as William stood to leave, she grabbed his hand. Dad, thanks. For believing me. For fighting for me. He looked down at her, his eyes glistening. Always, Maya. Always. The next morning, Maya sat in front of a laptop in the hotel's conference room, a simple backdrop of a blue curtain behind her. William's PR manager, a calm woman named Lisa, had set up a camera and microphone. But Maya had insisted on keeping it minimal, no makeup, no fancy lighting. Just her in her hoodie and jeans. Zoe sat off camera, giving her a thumbs up, while William stood in the corner. His presence a quiet reassurance. Maya took a deep breath, looking into the camera. Hi, I'm Maya Johnson, she began, her voice steady but raw. 2 days ago, I was on Horizon Airways Flight 712, and I was treated like I didn't belong. They accused me of using a fake ticket, refused to check my proof, and physically grabbed me in front of everyone. I'm only here, safe, because my dad is the CEO. But what about everyone else who doesn't have that? This isn't just my story, it's about how we treat people, how we assume things based on how they look. I'm asking for airlines, not just Horizon, to do better. Train your staff. Listen to passengers. Make sure no one else feels like I did. She paused, her eyes glistening, but her voice firm. To the passengers who stood up for me, who recorded, who spoke out, thank you. You reminded me I wasn't alone. Let's keep pushing for change together. She nodded at Lisa, who stopped the recording. Zoe rushed over, pulling her into a hug. You nailed it, she whispered. That was so real. William stepped forward, his face beaming with pride. You did good, Maya. That's going to mean something to a lot of people. The video went live that afternoon, shared by Horizon's official accounts and picked up by news outlets within hours. By evening, it had millions of views, the comments a flood of support, anger, and calls for reform. Some criticized Maya, calling her entitled or questioning her story. But the overwhelming response was one of solidarity. Activists reached out, offering to amplify her message. Other passengers came forward, sharing their own stories of mistreatment on airlines, turning Maya's experience into a rallying cry. Back at Horizon, the investigation gained momentum. Former passengers contacted the company, revealing Carl's history of hostile behavior at various airports. One woman described a similar incident where Carl had questioned her first-class ticket, implying she couldn't afford it. Another man recalled Brenda's dismissive attitude when he'd complained about a delayed flight. The evidence piled up, painting a picture of systemic flaws in training and oversight. William announced a company-wide review, promising to implement mandatory bias training and stricter accountability measures. Maya watched it all from the sidelines, her hotel room a temporary refuge. Zoe kept her laughing, dragging her to the pier for ice cream and silly selfies, but the media storm was relentless. Reporters camped outside the hotel, their cameras flashing whenever she stepped out. Her phone buzzed with interview requests, support messages, and the occasional hateful comment. She tried to focus on the positive, the people who saw her, who heard her, but the attention was suffocating. One night, as she and Zoe scrolled through X, Maya stumbled on a thread from a flight attendant at another airline. Maya's story is why I speak up when I see profiling, the woman wrote. It's not just one airline, it's an industry problem. We need to change. The thread had thousands of likes, sparking a broader conversation about reform. Maya felt a spark of hope, a sense that her voice was rippling outward, touching lives she'd never meet. As the week ended, Maya packed her bags, ready to head back to New York with her dad. The fight wasn't over. Carl and Brenda's hearings loomed, and the media frenzy showed no signs of slowing, but she felt stronger, more certain of her place in it. She'd spoken her truth, and the world had listened. Now, it was time to see what came next. Maya Johnson stood at the edge of the auditorium stage, her hands gripping the podium, the weight of 100 pairs of eyes resting on her. It was her high school graduation, 3 months after the incident on Horizon Airways Flight 712, and she'd been chosen to give the closing speech. The bruise on her arm had faded to a faint shadow, but the memory of that day, Carl Mitchell's grip, Brenda Walsh's accusations, the passengers' phones capturing her humiliation remained vivid. The world had changed since then, and so had she. Her story had sparked a movement, and today, she wanted her classmates to carry that forward. She took a deep breath, her voice steady as she began. We're not just graduating today. We're stepping into a world that needs us to stand up, to speak out, to make things right. Don't wait for permission, be the change. The auditorium erupted in applause, her peers cheering, some standing. Maya's eyes found her dad, William Johnson, in the front row, his face beaming with pride. Zoe, her best friend, whooped from the back, waving a glittery sign that read "Go Maya." Maya smiled, her heart full. The speech wasn't just for her classmates, it was a promise to herself, a reminder of the strength she'd found in the aftermath of the flight. She stepped off the stage, her cap slightly askew, and hugged her dad tightly, the familiar scent of his cologne grounding her. The months since San Francisco had been a whirlwind. The investigation into Carl and Brenda had concluded swiftly, the evidence overwhelming. Passenger videos, Maya's testimony, and a string of prior complaints painted a damning picture. Carl, it turned out, had a history of targeting passengers he deemed out of place. With 3 documented incidents of racial profiling at various airports, Brenda, while less experienced, had been complicit. Her actions on the flight showing a lack of judgment that Horizon couldn't overlook. Both were terminated within weeks, their names quietly removed from the employee roster. William had personally overseen the process, ensuring no loopholes allowed them to slip away. But the consequences didn't end there. The lawyer from Seat 1B, Michael Harper, had worked with Maya's family to file a civil suit against Carl and Brenda for assault and emotional distress. The case was still pending, but Harper was confident, citing the videos as irrefutable evidence. Maya didn't care much about the money, she wanted accountability, a public acknowledgement of the wrong done to her. The suit sent a message: no one, not even airline staff, was above the law. Horizon Airways, under Williams' leadership, had moved quickly to address the systemic issues the incident exposed. A new training program, dubbed the Horizon Respect Initiative, was rolled out across the company, mandatory for all employees. From gate agents to pilots, it focused on implicit bias, de-escalation, and cultural sensitivity, with real-world scenarios drawn from Maya's experience. William had invited Maya to review the curriculum, and she'd been blunt, pushing for tougher accountability measures and regular audits. It's not enough to teach it once, she'd told him. People need to be checked over and over. He'd listened, implementing her suggestions without hesitation. The company also launched a scholarship program in Maya's name, aimed at supporting underrepresented students pursuing careers in aviation. Maya had been hesitant at first, uncomfortable with the spotlight, but Zoe convinced her it was a chance to inspire others. Think of some kid out there, seeing your name and knowing they can make it, Zoe had said. The first recipients were announced a month ago, 3 high school seniors from diverse backgrounds, their thank you letters to Maya brimming with gratitude. Reading them, she'd cried, feeling the ripple of her story in ways she hadn't expected. The media frenzy had slowed but never fully stopped. Maya's video statement, recorded in the San Francisco hotel, had become a touchstone for discussions about airline reform. Activists cited it in campaigns for industry-wide changes, and other passengers shared their own stories of mistreatment, creating a groundswell of pressure. The Federal Aviation Administration had even launched a review of passenger rights protocols, with Horizon's case as a key example. Maya followed the developments on X, where her name still popped up in threads about justice and equity. The support was overwhelming. Though not universal, some trolls called her a drama queen or accused her of playing the race card. Those stung, but she'd learned to focus on the voices that mattered. William had faced his own challenges. As Horizon's CEO, he'd taken heat for the incident, with critics questioning how such behavior could thrive under his watch. He'd responded with transparency, holding a press conference alongside Maya. "What happened to my daughter was a failure of our values," he'd said, his voice steady but raw. "We're not perfect, but we're committed to doing better." The public response was mixed. Some praised his accountability. Others demanded his resignation, but William stayed focused, steering Horizon toward reform while shielding Maya from the worst of the backlash. For Maya, the personal toll had been the hardest. The first weeks after the flight were a blur of anxiety, her sleep fractured by nightmares of Carl's grip, Brenda's sneer. She'd avoided airports, dreading the thought of boarding another plane. Therapy helped, giving her tools to process the trauma, and Zoe's relentless positivity kept her from retreating too far inward. Slowly, she'd rebuilt her confidence, reclaiming the parts of herself the incident had shaken. Flying back to New York with her dad, she'd chosen first class again, a deliberate act of defiance. The crew had been impeccable, their kindness almost overwhelming, and she'd landed feeling lighter, like she'd taken back a piece of her power. Now, as the graduation ceremony ended, Maya mingled with her classmates, their laughter and hugs a balm to her soul. The auditorium buzzed with excitement, caps tossed in the air, families snapping photos. William stood nearby, chatting with Zoe's parents, his eyes never straying far from Maya. She caught his gaze and smiled, a silent thank you for everything: his fight, his faith, his love. Later, at the graduation party in Zoe's backyard, Maya sat under string lights, a plate of barbecue balanced on her lap. Zoe plopped down beside her, stealing a rib. "So, Miss Inspirational Speaker, what's next? College? World domination?" Maya laughed, the sound freer than it had been in months. "College first. I'm thinking NYU, maybe major in social justice or something. I want to keep pushing, you know? Make sure stories like mine don't get buried." Zoe nodded, her eyes serious. "You're already doing that. Look at what you started. People are listening, Maya. That's huge." Maya glanced at the sky, the stars faint against the city glow. She thought of the passengers on Flight 712, their phones and voices turning a moment of injustice into a call for change. She thought of the scholarship recipients, the new training programs, the conversations still unfolding online and in boardrooms. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been judged, dismissed, or silenced, and that gave her hope. William joined them, a soda in hand. "You'd plotting to take over the world," he teased, settling into a chair. "Something like that," Maya said, grinning. "Dad, I was thinking, maybe we could do a follow-up video. Check in with people, see how the reforms are going. Keep the pressure on." William's eyebrows rose, a spark of pride in his eyes. "I like it. Let's talk to Lisa, get it set up. You're not done shaking things up, are you?" "Nope," Maya said, her voice firm. "Not even close." As the party continued, music and laughter filling the air, Maya felt a quiet certainty settle over her. The flight had been a crucible, forging her into someone stronger, someone who knew her voice could move mountains. She'd faced the worst: prejudice, humiliation, fear, and come out the other side, not just whole, but powerful. The skies had tested her, but they'd also shown her what she could do when she refused to back down. She looked at Zoe, at her dad, at the friends and family celebrating around her, and knew this was just the beginning. The world was messy, unfair, but it was also full of people ready to stand up, to record, to fight. And Maya was one of them, ready to keep climbing, keep speaking, keep bridging the gaps between where things were and where they could be.